Hello dear students, welcome to Toppscholars. Today we'll be discussing about the language of chemistry wherein we'll be discussing about chemical formula. So friends, what is a chemical formula? A chemical formula is a symbolic representation of a molecule of an element or a compound. That is, a chemical formula is actually used to represent the composition of a molecule. A chemical formula actually gives you information about the number of atoms, the type of atoms that are present in a molecule. So, a chemical formula generally involves writing down the symbols of the elements that are involved in a formula, right? So, let's take an example to understand what do we mean by a chemical formula, right? So, here you can see we have NaCl, right? Now, in NaCl, the symbol Na stands for sodium, whereas the symbol Cl stands for chlorine. So, friends, NaCl is simply sodium chloride. So, sodium chloride is made up of sodium, which is represented by the symbol Na, and it is made up of chlorine, which is represented by the symbol Cl. Now, let's have one more example. So, here I have AlCl3. Now friends, tell me, what does the symbol Al represent? Yes, the symbol Al represents aluminium. And what about Cl? Yes, the symbol Cl represents chlorine. So here we have a molecule of aluminium chloride, that is, here we have a compound aluminium chloride, which is made up of two elements, that is aluminium, which is represented by Al, and chlorine, which is represented by Cl. Now friends, let's discuss what do we mean by atomicity. Now friends, atomicity is simply the number of atoms of all the elements that are present in a molecule of a compound, right? Let's understand this with an example, right? So, the first type we have is monoatomic elements. Monoatomic elements are those elements which are made up of only one atom, and so they are said to be monoatomic elements. So, how do we represent these monoatomic elements? They are represented by the symbol of that element. For example, helium. Helium is a monoatomic element, and so it is represented by the symbol He, and the symbol of helium is He, right? What about argon? Argon again is a monoatomic element which is represented by the symbol Ar. Neon is represented by the symbol Ne. So remember, monoatomic elements are elements which are made up of only one atom, and so they are represented by the symbol of that element. But friends, there are some elements which exist as molecules, right? So, how do we represent these elements? So, what we need to do is, we need to write down the number which represents its atomicity as the subscript after the symbol. Let's take an example. So, here we have diatomic elements. Diatomic elements are those elements which are made up of two atoms. So, how do we represent these diatomic elements? Well, what we need to do is, we need to write down the symbol of the element, and we need to write down the number representing its atomicity as the subscript after the symbol. So, here we have some examples. Here you can see we have oxygen. Oxygen is diatomic. So, how is oxygen represented? Yes, we've written down the symbol of oxygen O, and we've written down the subscript as 2 because it contains two atoms of oxygen. The next one we have is hydrogen. Hydrogen exists as hydrogen molecule which has two atoms of hydrogen. So, again, we have represented the hydrogen molecule with the symbol H, that is for hydrogen, right? And we have written down 2 as the subscript, which indicates that it has two atoms of hydrogen. So, its atomicity is 2. Next one we have chlorine. Again, it is represented as Cl, and we have 2 written down as the subscript, which indicates that chlorine is diatomic, that is, it contains two atoms of chlorine. Now friends, what is the significance of chemical formula? Why is it so important to write down a chemical formula, right, for any compound? This is because the chemical formula of any compound represents the constituent elements that are present in the compound. Let's take an example to understand this, right? So, here we have CO2, right? Now, the symbol C over here represents, yes, it represents carbon, whereas the symbol O represents oxygen. So, the chemical formula gives you information about the constituent elements that are present in a compound. Similarly, the chemical formula also gives you information about the number of atoms of each element that are present in the molecule. Let's take the same example of carbon dioxide over here. So, now friends, tell me, what is the number of carbon atoms that is present in CO2? Yes, it is 1. And what about oxygen? What is the number of oxygen atoms? Yes, 2 oxygen atoms. Exactly. Let's take one more example, an easy example, AlCl3, right? Now friends, tell me, how many atoms of aluminium, Al, are there in this compound? Yes, 1 atom of aluminium. And what about chlorine? How many atoms are there? Yes, 3 atoms of chlorine. So from this we can say that a chemical formula gives you information about the constituent elements that are present in the compound, and it also gives you information about the number of atoms of each element that is present in the molecule. Let's take one more example, that is H2O, water molecule. Now friends, tell me, how many atoms of hydrogen are there over here? Yes, 2 atoms of hydrogen. And how many atoms of oxygen are there? 1 atom of oxygen. So friends, from this we understand that a chemical formula gives you information about the constituent elements that are present in the compound, and it also gives you information about the number of atoms of each element that is present in the molecule. To learn more about this topic, download Toppscholars app.